This is it. This is the end of season number 2 of I Made a Podcast, and I'm here and I'm going to share with you the top things that I learned from every single podcaster that I spoke to in this past season. All right, so I'm going to take you from episode number 1 straight through to the last episode that I released last week, and I'm going to give you the best information to help you in your podcasting journey here in the season finale of season number 2 of I Made a Podcast. Let's get into it today. Hey everyone, welcome back to this episode of I Made a Podcast. I'm so grateful that you are here and we did it. We made it to the end of season number 2 and I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you were on this journey with me. Now in this episode today, as I did in season number 1, I gave a recap of every single person that I spoke to, and I'm going to do that again in this episode. And the hope is that I will be able to share with you the best pieces of insight from every single podcaster that I spoke to, so that you can take away the best pieces of insight and apply it into your podcasting journey. And you should absolutely go back and listen to any of the past episodes from season number 2. It was a hard job for me to get just one piece of insight or wisdom from the podcasters that I spoke to, because every single episode was full of wisdom. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to all of the episodes from season number 2 of I Made a Podcast. They're all there in the archives here on YouTube if you're watching the video, or on Spotify, on Apple, whatever platform that you're watching. You can go back and listen to the past episodes and they will encourage you. They will give you a little bit more insight on how you can take your podcast from this level and get it to the next level. Now, just before we get into this episode, I want to make sure that you're aware of a couple things that I have coming up. They're really important. Next week on July 22nd at 8 p.m., I am hosting a free online event called the Podcast Lab. It's my community where we get together and we talk about all things podcasting so that we can help every single podcaster who joins get to the next level. The topic for next week's session is podcasting SEO. So I have an expert coming in next week to share tips and strategies that you can apply into your podcast right away, so that you can take your podcast to the next level and be found by people who are looking for the content that you are creating. So join the class. It's next week. It's at 8 p.m. and you can register for the class by clicking the link in the description, okay? Typing in your email address, and then I will send out the Zoom link to you so that you can join on July 22nd. And if you're not able to make it during that session, still register, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the recording out to you after we finish the session. So you can still listen. You just won't be able to participate in the call, but I want to send it to you anyway. So go down and register. And the second thing that I want to talk to you about is my book, my new ebook. It's called The Podcasting Blueprint: From Idea to Launch and Beyond. So if you're listening to this right now, and if you were thinking about starting a podcast but don't know how, go and download my ebook. It's free, and I give you all of the steps in a simple, easy to digest book where you can just follow the steps, and I will outline everything that you need to do so that your podcast can move from idea, something that you're just thinking about and maybe you thought that you could never do it, to actually getting the idea into something that you can actually listen to or watch if you're doing a video podcast, and then from there to take it to the next level where you can actually start to thrive as a podcaster. So go get my ebook. It's called The Podcasting Blueprint: From Idea to Launch and Beyond. Okay, so the link is in the description for that if you are starting a podcast. But now that that's out of the way, let's get to the goodness from this episode today. It's my season finale. I'm sharing the best tips from all of the podcasters that I've spoken to in season number 2. So let's get into it. DJ, hit that music. I don't got a DJ here, but whatever. So the first person that I spoke to in season number 2 was Matt Drinkon. He has a podcast called the Eternal Optimist Podcast, and I love his podcast. It's so positive, and there was just a wonderful conversation that I had with him. So one of the big things that I learned from Matt Drinkon is that you need to be ready to ask. Do your research and understand the person that you're speaking to on your podcast, and be ready to ask them for connections, ask them for advice. Do your research and understand who they are and what their strengths are, and be ready to ask them. A closed mouth doesn't get fed, so make sure that you know the question that you want to ask the person that you are interviewing on your podcast. And also do your research and ask good questions. And the reason why you want to do this is so that you can have an engaging conversation with the people that you were speaking to on that episode. Okay, so be prepared to ask, and ask good questions. Now, the next episode that I released was with a podcaster by the name of Sue Saller. She's actually an author as well, a coach. She does a lot of things, but her podcast is called Small Steps, Big Wins. And one of the things that she shared with me that was really encouraging for me and for all of the newer podcasters out there is that podcasting will help you to become a better communicator. Don't be afraid to listen to your podcast. I know sometimes you may have started a podcast and you listen to your voice and be like, oh, I don't like the way that I sound. But listen to your voice and take the steps to improve the way that you speak. As you listen to yourself, see if you can find ways to reduce the filler words, become a better question asker, and learn how to summarize points for the guests that you speak so that you can capture their thoughts in one-liner and deliver it so that the people listening to your podcast will be able to capture a nugget after your guest has answered a question that you asked them. Now, after I spoke to Sue, I had a really, really good conversation with Chris Paniotu. He is a financial advisor and he has a podcast called Capitalize Your Finances. And he is killing it. I loved my conversation with Chris. Anybody with the name of Chris has, I know I was going to have a good conversation with him. But one of the things that he shared, he's so positive, and I love his attitude concerning people. One of the things that he shared was a stat that he actually learned, that he got from his mother actually, where she told him that 1 out of 10 people will not like you. And if that is true, sometimes we may hear something like that and be discouraged because there's one person that may not like us. But Chris shared a different perspective. He said that means if you meet one person that doesn't like you, the next 9 people will absolutely love you. And you should focus on those people who are going to love what you are saying. And this is especially important with podcasting because you are taking a step of faith, a leap of faith even, by putting yourself out there so that people can hear your thoughts and put your face on social media and in podcasting and all over the world, and you open yourself up to criticism, and there might be one person that might not like your voice. But what that means is the next 9 people are going to love you. So focus on the 9 people that are going to love you and not the one person that is not going to like you. It's just a perspective shift for you. So think about the people who are going to love you and love what you have to say, and focus on serving them with your podcast. This was a piece of insight that Chris shared in my conversation with him, and I would encourage you to go back and listen to my episode with Chris because it was the bomb. It was like amazing. So go and listen to that conversation that I had with Chris Paniotu. And again, his podcast is called Capitalize Your Finances. Now, for the first time in I Made a Podcast history, I interviewed a husband and wife, a couple who work on their podcast together. They're co-hosts, and they have a podcast called Beyond I Do. I'm talking about Byron and Margaret McKee. And the conversation that I had with them was so great. It's a relationship podcast, and it was so good to hear their perspective on how they were able to start their podcast and some of the hurdles that they had to overcome in order to deliver their content consistently. Now, because they live in the same house and they have a schedule and they have a family that lives in that house too, one of the things that I really admire and I love about their conversation is how practical they are about when it's time to record. They close the door, and when the family sees the door in the dining room is closed, they know that they're recording the podcast episode, and they know to tiptoe around the house. And they spend time planning their podcast, going out of their house to maybe a Starbucks or a restaurant and spend time to plan their podcast. And they treat it as a date night too, right? So that's pretty cool as well. So that's something that podcasters need to do. Spend time planning your podcast. Be diligent and purposeful how you plan your podcast and the strategy that you're going to take in whatever season that you're in with your podcast. And then be practical if you were living in a house with other people where you need to coordinate your recording schedule with the schedule of the other people in your family. Okay, so this is something that I learned from Byron and Margaret. And again, their podcast is called Beyond I Do. It's a great podcast. I would encourage everybody to listen to it. So my next conversation was with Alex Dumas, and he has 2 podcasts, and it really blew my mind when he told me this, right? So he has a daily podcast that he actually records daily. It's called Love, Serve, Care. And he also has a monthly podcast that is called Elevate and Celebrate. And it really blows my mind that he has been doing that for such a long time, and he has not missed a day, which is absolutely remarkable. So there was a lot of insights and wisdom that I got from Alex. Now, if you are out there and you're trying to start a daily podcast, go listen to this episode, this conversation that I had with Alex, because you can apply some of the things that he is doing into your podcast if you're trying to start a daily podcast. Now, one of the big things that I learned from Alex is that the things that we share in our podcast, we can leave them back for our loved ones, like an audio diary that you can leave back for your kids, because our time here on earth is limited, and through the things that we share and put out there on our podcast, we can leave these things back behind for our kids to hear, our thoughts, what we were working on, some of the things that we were striving for, our goals and our hopes. These are things that we can leave back as podcasters for our families to listen to, so that they can still hear our voice when we are long gone. So that's one of the things that I learned from my conversation with Alex. So if you are out there podcasting, don't just think of it as you are making content. Think of it as you are creating, as Alex put it, an audio diary where you can leave these things back for people long after we are gone from this earth, and they'll still listen to it, they'll still hear from it, and it will still be a benefit and a blessing to them. So that's one of the things that I took away from my conversation with Alex Dumas. Go listen to my conversation with him and go check out his podcast as well. He's also an author, a coach, and oh yes, one of the things that he also mentioned was how Toastmasters helped him to become a better speaker. So if you're a podcaster and if you struggle with, doing like 20 takes to just do one paragraph of your intro, try Toastmasters. So that's a way where you can learn how to formulate your thoughts in your mind and deliver it in a clear and concise way so that other people can receive your message that you are trying to communicate. Toastmasters has been around for decades. I don't know how long, but it's out there, and we could join a club and learn how to speak better so that we can become more effective communicators on our podcasts. All right. So that's another thing that I learned from Alex, and I can't remember that. I didn't remember that before, but I just remembered it right now. Thank God. And I put it in this episode. So that's one really, really big takeaway for everybody out there. Toastmasters. Gotcha. Now, my conversation with Ann Alexander Satter was really, really exciting. She is an actor. She has a podcast called Act Bold, and it just fits. I love it. Now, in her story, she shared how she moved from America to Germany and got married, and she kind of put her acting career on hold. But then when the time came for her to pick up that acting career again, it was really difficult. But through trial and error of trying to find the right coach for her acting career, she actually started a business. And what she's actually doing now is helping people find their passion and turning their passion into profit. So that was one of the big things that I learned from my conversation with Ann. And if you are unsure about what your passion is, I would encourage you to go and listen to this conversation that I had with Ann. Not only will you get a better indication of how to identify your passion, but how to turn your passion into profit, how to turn it into a business, how to monetize that passion and continue to allow it to feed you with energy as you continue to pursue it. And not only will you be a blessing to yourself, but you will be a blessing to everybody else around you when you find that passion. And she actually has a workshop that she does ever so often. So if you want to join that workshop, I have a link down below to get to that workshop. You can click on it and you'll be able to join that workshop when she has it and start to find your passion and turn it into something that could be profitable for you. So that's what I learned from my conversation with Ann Alexander Satter. Now, the next podcaster that I spoke to, I was so intrigued when I saw their name show up on my list. I was so intrigued because of the topic that this podcaster talks about. I spoke to Manisha Solomon. Her podcast is called the Archery Parent Podcast. Yes, Archery Parent Podcast. It's not made for the archer, but it's made for the parents. Yes, the parents of the archer. And it was such a niche topic, and I was so curious to pick her brain to understand why she got into it and how she was able to do it and how it's doing. It's fairly new still, but from my conversation that I had with Manisha, she is thriving and people are learning a lot. And it's an underserved niche because there may be archery podcasts, but they're focused only on the archer, but none of them are focused on the parents of the archer who really need to learn how to equip their kids to be successful in the sport, right? So this was a really different perspective, and I had a great conversation with Manisha. So what I learned from this conversation and what I'll share with all of you today is if you think you have a topic for a podcast that is maybe obscure or just too niche, chances are it's not, and chances are it's the topic is so underserved that you can carve out a nice little slice of the pie for yourself and be a real benefit to a lot of people. So still go out there and make that podcast on that very specific niche topic, because Manisha's podcast is not even about archery specifically, it's about the parents of the archer. So it's so niche of a niche, and she's doing great. She's impacting lots of parents who are out there learning and trying to keep their kids engaged in this sport of archery so that they can thrive and become the best that they can be, right? So that's why it's such a great podcast. So go and check out Manisha's podcast. It's called the Archery Parent Podcast, and go listen to my conversation with her so that you can see what you can learn and apply into your situation if you have a very niche topic that you're thinking about starting a podcast on. Now, I spoke to Andrea Mason, and her podcast is called Unleashing the Champion Within. Now, Andrea is such an encouragement. She was such a breath of fresh air for me when I was speaking with her. Her energy levels was so exciting. Man, it was just a wonderful conversation that I had with Andrea. Again, go listen to her podcast if you are feeling down or discouraged about anything. By listening to her podcast, I guarantee you will feel a little bit more lighter, a little bit more encouraged, and you'll be able to find out what's inside of you that you can now use to unleash the champion within, as her podcast is titled. She has a way of speaking to ignite the fire inside of you so that you can get up out the place that you're in and get up and rise to the position where you are destined to be. This is one of the big things that I took away from Andrea and my conversation with her. So as podcasters, we all have a message, and sometimes the world may beat us down and try to kind of stifle that message so it can't get out. But what I learned from Andrea is that we can always get up and get back into the race and continue to fight the good fight until we meet the mark that we are trying to strive for. So this is something that I learned from Andrea. She's such an encouragement. Go listen to my conversation with her, and you can go and check out her podcast as well. It's called Unleashing the Champion Within. All right, everybody. Next up, I spoke to Haley Hayhurst. Now, she is a podcast producer. She runs Espresso Podcast Productions, and she also has two podcasts on her own. One is called The Podcast Cafe, and Employee to Boss is the other podcast. Now, we dived into so much other things related to podcasting because she's also a coach. So the conversation was really podcast focused. There was a lot of good insights that were shared in that episode that I did with Haley. One of the big insights that I got from my conversation with her is with regards to interviewing people on our podcast. Now, usually when we interview someone, we have a list of questions that we want to ask that person. But when we ask those questions, we should listen to understand versus listening to respond. That's another level of skills required when you're interviewing people on your podcast. So don't just listen to hear what they say just so that you can ask the next question. Listen to understand what they're saying so that you can possibly ask probing questions or deeper questions based on their response. And then the conversation after you do that will be a little bit more engaging, it will flow, and it will sound a little easier for people listening to it. Now, one of the other things that Haley mentioned during my conversation with her, again, it was really, really powerful because we're both podcasters. We coach podcasters on a regular basis. She said that as podcasters, we need to create a community, a place where the people who engage with our content can gather together to talk about it and further engage with that content, where we can connect with them and they can connect with us and have further discussions. We need to create that community for our podcast. It's not enough just to record an episode, do your best to make it sound all perfect, and then publish it on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever. It's not enough to do that. You have to create a community, a place where people can talk about the content that you just shared. And I think this is big if you really want to get more downloads with your podcast. Create a community where people can talk about your episodes and talk about your podcast and engage with you as you release new episodes. This is a big key that I think some podcasters are missing. And if you want your podcast to get to the next level, create a community for your podcast. And I think that will help drastically create or get more downloads for your podcast. Now, the next podcaster that I spoke to, his name was Wayne Veltzman. Now, I had a great conversation with him. His podcast is called Journey to Legacy. Now, I was just so floored when I heard this. Now, most of the times we hear people having like a life-threatening situation, they overcome it, and then they make a big pivot in their lives. Now, this was the first time I've actually spoken to someone who actually had something happen to him. He actually fell off of a building, a 2-story building, and he broke some bones in his spine and stuff like that. He's able to walk and he recovered now from it. But after that, he actually made a shift, a pivot in his life, and he started to talk about his podcast, which is Journey to Legacy, where he's speaking about how to leave a legacy back for the people who will be here after our time on earth is done. One of the key things that he mentioned was that if your life was to end right now, your legacy starts tomorrow. So we should always be focused on the legacy that we will leave behind for the people who are here after us. What will they remember of us? What will they say about us? What will the lasting memory be when someone thinks about you 10, 15, 20 years from now? That is the legacy that really counts. It's not about money, it's not about cars, houses, but what will people really remember when they think about you in 20 years from now? And you should focus on leaving that legacy right now, because your life could end tomorrow. And what will happen to your legacy? What will your legacy be? So think about that and start working on leaving that legacy right now. That's what I learned from my conversation with Wayne Veltzman. Now, last but certainly not least, I had a conversation with Jen Samuels. Now, her podcast is called Java with Jen, Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life. And it was such a refreshing and wonderful conversation that I had with her. So I was resonating with Jen so much because I'm a Christian as well. So we were talking about things that were so powerful and principles that she was using in her podcast and she applied to get her where she is in her podcast. And it was such a wonderful conversation. And she shared so much insight with us about podcasting. One of the key things that she shared was how she changed the name of her podcast to not only be Java with Jen, but to add subtitles with keywords in it that helped people know and help the algorithm find her podcast, right? So it was really key what she shared, and that was something that I actually changed some of my podcast titles and the podcast episode titles to include keywords in them so that the algorithm can find them, so that when people type in things in the search, it will show up for them, and so that people can clearly see what those episodes and what my podcast is about. And I think this is a really good piece of insight and wisdom that she shared. And trust me, you go back and listen to that episode that I did with Jen. It was full with specific actionable things that podcasters can do in order to get better. Little things that you can do right away and it will take your podcast from this level and get it to the next level. So that was my conversation with Jen Samuels. Her podcast again is called Java with Jen, Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life. So go listen to her podcast if it resonates with you as well. And that's it. That's the end of my recap for season number 2 of I Made a Podcast. Season number 2 is done, and I'm so excited for season number 3 already. I've already started the pre-work to get it ready. Now, one of the things that I want to do for season number 3 is work with one of you influencers out there. If you have a platform, if you're an influencer, or you share something on social media and you have a following, you're passionate about something, but you don't have a podcast, but you want one, I want to work with you. What I want to do for season number 3 of I Made a Podcast is work with one of you out there to go through the process of starting the podcast, generating the idea, and working on all the technical things in the back end, and then doing the recordings and releasing the podcast. And I want to record that as a part of a series for I Made a Podcast. And as you go through that process with me, you will have a podcast that you can take forward and carry forward after we finish that process. So if you want to get in on this, I put a link down below to enter your information. I'm only going to pick maybe 1 or 2 people to do it with for season number 3 of the podcast. But if you are interested in doing this, go into the description, click on the link, enter your information, and then I'll select 2 people to do it with for season number 3 of I Made a Podcast, and we'll work through all the logistics. I'll reach out to you, and then we will make it happen. So I'll have my podcast episodes showing you how to start a podcast, and that will be season number 3, and you will have a podcast afterwards that you'll be able to carry forward. I'll show you how to easily continue the work that we've started so that you can continue to do your podcast. So if you ever had a dream about having a podcast but you didn't know how to do it, let me help you. Go and join, click the link in the description and enter your information, and I'll reach out to you and we'll make it happen. But that's it for I Made a Podcast today. Thank you for joining in. Remember, the best time to start a podcast was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and make it happen. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening to all the episodes for season number 2. Stay tuned and subscribe. Season number 3 is coming up, and it's going to be great. And I will see you there. Peace. Let's go.